What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone. Again, in this time, we are here with Frederik of Fans of the Dark. Thanks for being here today, man. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. Happy record release day. You have your self-titled album out now. How was the overall making of this album? Was there kind of like a preconceived idea of what you wanted this self-titled debut to sound like? Was there a lot of improvising involved? How did this album sort of see the light of day?
Well, we wrote it last summer, really during the pandemic, and while we were at home, pretty much. So we had a lot of time to design it and come up with the concepts and all of that. So I think it came out pretty much the way we had envisioned it.
Hmm. And
It was not much improvised in the studio.
And you mentioned that you all came together during like the pandemic and quarantine and writing this. So I know it's kind of like a what if question, but if the pandemic never happened, would this album have not have seen the light of day? Was this sort of like a happy accident?
Well, I would have liked to say no, but you know, I'm not sure because it really gave me enough time to write a lot of songs, which I hadn't done in quite a while. I had been in earlier bands, but I'd never written songs so fast as I did last year. So it was a really weird situation, and I guess you could say that the pandemic really sped things up.
Um, and you definitely use the isolation and you use the time productively, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of time to. I mean, it was absurdly. It was like time to really relax in some strange way and just like do nothing and sit at home and like just reflect on stuff. You know. So it became a natural for me to kind of take up songwriting again and do this album, and yeah, that's how it came about.
And this album has like a really good sort of like '80s throwback sound to it. Is this kind of like the sound that you've always wanted to incorporate in music, or was it like just you felt like it was like the most appropriate time to make this sound to go along with your concept?
I wasn't really sure about the sound. None of us were in the beginning how it was going to sound. I just figured I listened to a lot of old school 80s metal, like, old Metallica, old Black Sabbath, old kind of Deep Purple and stuff, and some Rush and stuff. So I didn't really see it come together and sound the way it does, really. But now that it does, I mean, we had an awesome mixing engineer who's into that 80s vibe, Mike Palace, and he has his own records out as well, and on Frontiers, and he kind of sticks to that. He likes that sound, and once he started sending me tracks, I really liked it. So we kept really fat kind of snare drum sounds and that big sound. So I kind of liked it.
Yeah.
I
It definitely
Yeah.
has what I call the Frontiers charm behind it. Like I would have been able to tell that this album was coming out on Frontiers just by listening to the first single.
Yeah, well, it's good. I take that as a compliment. I love that what they do. So I'm really happy to be on this label.
Yeah, yeah, and they're great people too, and they have some great bands. They prove that the old school sound of rock and roll is far from dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. In terms of like, you mentioned that there's sort of like a story or sort of like a concept for this debut? I mean, was do you consider this album a concept album? Like, do you want listeners to be engaged in a story as much as the music, or is the album fairly open to interpretation?
Well, I'd love for people to interpret it their own way, but I guess you could say there are stories. I mean, I've taken themes out of, old horror films and novels and stuff I really love from my childhood and from my teenage years, which I really returned to while writing this album. So it's not just a story, but I guess you could say it's like a combination of all the stuff I was into when I was younger, when I was brought up.
And being the drummer of Fans of the Dark, do you almost like do you when and being also being like the songwriter, are you thinking of from like a very rhythmic standpoint when you like on how the whole rhythm is going to be? Like, do you lay down the rhythm and the drum patterns before anything else comes into play, or do you, when you're songwriting, you're maybe not just thinking about that, but you're thinking about melody and lyrics and all that?
Yeah, well, I try to think about it all when writing the song. But when you start sending like ideas to your guitar player, you know, he comes up with something and sends it back. You might have to tweak your own idea a little bit, and maybe you co-write some songs with the guys in the band. You know, maybe the singer comes in, Alex, his name is too, and maybe he has another idea of how to do it. So you know, we will filling the missing gaps together. Really, that's how it was with this album.
Mhm. Do you prefer being a songwriter to write when you're more alone in isolation, or do you prefer to be in like the company of your other bandmates in order to write the material?
Well, it's a tough question because it's really I prefer a bit of both. You know, it's really nice to be able to rehearse and to meet the guys and to play together. But on the other hand, it's such an efficient way now that we live in this society when you can just send everything digitally back and forth, and you don't have to travel anywhere. You know, it gets really comfortable to produce in that way. So I guess I must say I prefer the new way because you could really, you know, keep control from home if you want to. You can do it really from your kitchen or whatever you are, wherever you are. You know, it's
Yeah, I've always
it's
said
really
that.
easy.
I've always said that there needs to be a band where like each member is on a different continent, where like you have one member from North America, one member from South America, one member from Europe, one member from Africa, one in Australia, one in Asia, like a seven-piece band or six-piece, because I don't know anybody who would live in Antarctica, but a six-piece band all on different continents.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the great movies have been made, they usually are like, you know, the big Hollywood films or the big great films. They usually have like craftspeople from all over the world, you know, drawn into sharing their experiences and you know, like collaborating. So I like that idea. It's definitely a good idea, and you know, that's what music is. I mean, it's a heritage from all continents, right?
Yep.
Except maybe Antarctica, but
Yeah. Well, no, I think a lot of the black metal bands will probably try to go there eventually, right? And who knows? Maybe the Penguins down there come up with some sick riffs as well.
yeah,
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if
definitely.
penguin metal is also going to be a genre in the future.
Yeah, that sounds wicked. Wicked.
Now, being that you and every other member of the band also plays in other projects, does that influence also the sound of Fans of the Dark, or were you all trying to maybe do stuff that you never really like step into a lot of new uncharted territory that you wouldn't have experienced in your other bands?
Well, it's really hard to say from this point. It might be easier to answer that question after maybe two or three albums, because then we will have an idea of how we make albums. This is just, you know, one off. This is just our first attempt, and it took maybe a little longer to finish than I thought, and it's sort of the blueprint, you know. And it's really hard to answer. I don't know. I guess the other one's gonna be sort of similar in the making, but maybe it's gonna get done in a hmm. No, it's really a hard question to answer, but I don't know.
Yeah. And
We'll see.
I'm about to make it even harder for you because being that this is the debut, can you see maybe yourself can the band maybe see themselves experiment like sticking with the sound that we're hearing now, or are you gonna try to experiment more in the future?
Well, I'd love for it to evolve and experiment more with stuff, you know, because I get really tired of when you just when you're expected to do a certain album, you know, according to a formula. That's when you get tired of it, right? That's when you want to push the envelope, you know, and go further or go in a completely different direction. So I'm hoping for experimenting with other genres and mixing it up, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
And
would love that.
well, I think it also depends on the genre. Like, if you're like a death metal band, you kind of want to stick with that specific sound. Like Cannibal Corpse can kind of like do their own thing. And another good band example would be like AC/DC. They've kind of stuck with their sound, and it works for them. I think for what you have here, I think it's a good tip of the iceberg, and we could explore a lot more in the future.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that would be great to like in 20 years, if we're even around. It would be great to have a sound, like your own sound.
Yeah,
It's like we can't be the judge of our own sound right now, but maybe in the future we can look back on it. If you have like a catalog of 5 or 10 albums, you can say that we have a sound, or as a band like Kiss, for instance, which is changed dramatically the way they sound, back and forth, back and forth. They have like multiple sounds, according to me. I mean, if you ask me. Whereas Iron Maiden or AC/DC, which you mentioned, has like one sound.
yeah, definitely. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Is there just anything else? Like, can you be expecting to bring Fans of the Dark out on the road one day and maybe bring this material to a live setting, and anything else you would like to promote?
Yeah, I would love for it to come out and play live in the future. Maybe not. Hmm, with 8 songs, it's a little bit tricky, but maybe in the future with a couple more albums down the road, quickly recorded. Yeah, I would love to go on the road. Definitely, I'm hoping for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Fans of the Dark. Check out their debut self titled album. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.